Changing tracks and touching base with Dipen Sheth, Head Institutional Research at HDFC Securities. Backdrop for this conversation is the HDFC Securities Conference, which is largely focusing on the BFSI space. Let me just run you through the highlights. There are 19 companies meeting institutional investors over 2 days, including 6 unlisted companies and 13 listed companies. The companies are participating in the conference are between the size of about 2,800 crores to 32,000 crores. So they're covering the gamut really. Banks, small finance banks, as well as NBFCs. It's across the board that this conference is trying to get us a color on the banking system. Dipen, it's great to have you on the show. Good morning, and thanks for joining us. Firstly, the timing is very interesting for this conference because I know a lot of questions will be asked about what's happening with the big banks and the transition phase there. But give us your thoughts about holding this conference and what you hope to sell as part of the BFSI story in India.
So like you said, we've got 19 companies here ranging from, of course, 6 unlisted companies and 13 listed guys who are anywhere between 2,800 or let's say 3,000 crores all the way up to 32,000. It's a very interesting time to get all of them together under one roof for the benefit of investors to figure out what's going on. So firstly, I can think that, after the demonet pullback, many of these mid-sized financials, as it were, went through a little bit of a shock during demonet, and the pullback has been nothing short of spectacular. And they've grown at a fast clip over the last few years. Can they continue to grow at 20 and in some cases 30+%? This is one, issue that will matter for investors here on for their wealth to compound. Second, despite the demonet shock, barring 1 or 2 cases, the asset quality has mostly held up. No wonder valuations are running high at many of these companies. We are looking at 5 or even 6x 1 year forward in some cases. So you have a situation where you have high growth rates, 20-30% likely to succeed off a relatively small base, and high valuations. So is this going to hold up or not? And of course, in the face of asset quality concerns or otherwise, as might be baked in to investors' minds. So again, it's also interesting to note that very important regulatory changes have kicked in, not just the 180 to 90-day NPA recognition norm, but also now as part of the broader shift towards Ind AS, NBFCs have been first off the block and they've been required to get into what is known as expected credit loss or ECL-based provisioning rather than time-based provisioning. So I think it's a very good opportunity for investors to come together and interact with these 19 companies and figure out what's happening on the ground.
So give me a flavor, Dipen, of these 13 listed and 6 unlisted companies that are participating in the conference today.
So I'll purely go by alphabetical order and I'll pick some names randomly. So obviously there's AU Small Finance Bank, which had a fantastic IPO last year and has only built from there. We've seen a large block deal happening a couple of days ago there. There's, let's say, a small unlisted microfinance lender like Cashpore. You have steady performers like City Union Bank and DCB. You have a turnaround, in our view at least, and a long-term sustainable turnaround happening at Karur Vysya Bank. You have the stalwarts of the space, of the NBFC space like Mahindra Financial or the recently listed Mass Financial. You have a company like Northern Arc Capital, which has a business model which is a bit like Mass Financial. You have a PNB Housing Finance from the housing finance space. You have a Reliance Nippon Life Asset Management from the asset management space. You have the Shriram Twins. You have the recently listed banking star, which is RBL. You name it, they're all here. There's Ujjivan, there's unlisted players like Vaya and Vistar Financial Services. So I think there's this entire gamut of people running from microfinance to asset management to vehicle finance to MSME lending to small banks to emerging banks like RBL, turnaround banks like Karur Vysya. We have the entire spectrum here. What we don't have is the 50,000 crore plus market cap companies. And frankly, there's enough action happening out there and it's all for you to see in the headlines.
Right. From the investors who are participating, could you give us a color on what kind of interest is there within the banking space? Because some of the pockets that you refer to and some of the banks that you mentioned, there is a fair amount of money that's already poured in. I think investors will be very curious to understand the value opportunities in
Right.
this space, which will be few and far between. It's more of a premium trade, so to speak. What do you hope to share with investors to help them make more money investing in the banking sector in India?
So I would partly disagree with you there. I think what's apparent to us at this event is that some of the banks which are or even the NBFCs which are trading at high valuations seem to be doing so for the right reasons, and that is that they can combine high growth rates and have a tight leash on asset quality. And an RBL or a City Union Bank or an AU Small Finance Bank are very good examples of that. On the other hand, there are some turnarounds which we think are happening, let's say at a Karur Vysya Bank, where there might be